All right, today we're going to be discussing Algebra 1, Chapter 3, Review Guide. So here we go. We're going to talk about a function and what makes something a function. There's two reasons why you're going to state something is a function. I'm going to write this at the bottom, every input has one output or passes the vertical line test. So if you think something is a function, you are going to give one of these two reasons for it being a function. Vice versa, if you think something is not a function, you would say that it does not pass the vertical line test or that each input does not have one output. So question number one, I'm looking at this point right here and this one right there, 1713. This is not a function because every input does not have one output, or you can state that the number 1 has two outputs. Next one, I'm looking at all the input values, -2, 0, 2, and 4, and I see that each one has an output, and therefore this one is a function because each input has one output. So understand, functions, these are the only two reasons you would say that something is a function. Next page, we're going to talk about the word linear. Now, reasons that something is linear. One, there is a constant rate of change. Or two, you can make it into the y equals mx plus b form. So these are the reasons that something is linear. So now, looking at number 3, you cannot make that because you have an x as a power. X is an exponent. All right, so therefore this is non-linear. And you could say cannot be put into the y equals mx plus b form or must have a exponent or power of 1. The second one, I can make that into the y equals mx plus b form. Each of the exponents is to the first power. So this one is considered linear. And I would put y equals mx plus b form. Next one. Now we're looking at a chart. It goes up by 2, up by 3, up by 3, up by 3, up by 1, up by 1, up by 1. So this one would be linear because it has a constant rate of change. Now, make sure your teacher allows you to abbreviate constant rate of change, but ultimately those are the two reasons why you can state that something is linear. It either has a constant rate of change or can be placed into the y equals mx plus b form. So now I'm going to determine the domain and range of the relation and determine whether it represents a function. Remember, going back into what we talked about before, looking at the graph, if you can pass the vertical line test, then it is a function. I'm looking at number 6 and saying that is not a function. Reason, it fails the vertical line test. I'm going to go ahead and circle the 2 points at which it does fail the vertical line test. Okay, so it is not a function because it fails the vertical line test. There are 2 points on top of each other, and so therefore that is not a function. Now, this is a discrete graph. Not sure why we didn't ask that, but I believe it might be on the test. This is a discrete, so therefore you're going to do individual points. So this is the point 2, 4. This is the point 2, 2. This is the point 3, 3. This is the point 4, 2. We have 5, 3, and 6, 4. So now, stating the domain values will be the x values. So you're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The range then is the y values. You again have a 2, a 4, 3, and that would be it. You do not have to repeat any values. So that would be all the y values and all the x values for this function. The next one passes the vertical line test, therefore is a function. Now, this one is a continuous graph. In a continuous graph, you need the highest and lowest points and the furthest to the left and furthest to the right. In this case, the point -3, 1 is both the highest and furthest to the left, and +2, -3 is the furthest to the right and the furthest down. X values. It's a continuous graph, so therefore it must be a compound inequality, is between -3 and 2. And then the y values are between between -3, that is the lowest value, and 1. So again, on the x value, you're looking at this x to this x, and then the y value, you're looking from the smallest y to the largest y to get your domain and range. Now, you are given 3 x values to plug in here. So I want to find what g of -2 equals. I want to find what g of +1 equals. And I want to find what g of 5 equals. So I'm going to plug -2 in for x and solve. So -5 times -2 gets you g of -2 equals 17. You can also write that as the point -2, 17. Now, plugging 1 in. -5 times 1 plus 7, so g of 1 equals 2, or as the point, 1, 2. And -5 times 5 plus 7, so g of 5 is equal to -25 plus 7, so g of 5 equals -18, or the point 5, -18. Notationally speaking, you can write it either in functional notation or as a point. Doing this again, this time with an absolute value question. So I need f of -2. I need f of +1 and f of +5. So I'm going to plug -2 in for x. So negative, absolute value of -2 minus 5. Always do what's inside the absolute value first, then take the absolute value. So there's functional notation, or as a point, -1 minus 5. So now I'm plugging 1 in for the x's. Again, take the absolute value. And so there's functional notation, or as a point. And then the last one, plugging 5 in for x. And so I end up getting just 0, because you can't have a -0, or the point 5, 0. So functional notation, or as a point. Next one. Now, you got to be careful. Instead of the last question in which you were given all the x's, in this question you were actually giving the f of x, or the y value in the problem, and asked to find the x value. So I'm going to solve for when f of x is 15, and that gets you an x value of -5. Now, it merely asked for the x value, but if you wanted to write that as a point, meaning when x is -5, you would get 15. Next one, all the way over here, again, you're given the y, or the g of x value. Using a little algebra skills here now, I'm going to solve this equation and multiply both sides by 4. So I get x is 4. Again, if you want to write that as a point, you'd be talking about the point 4, 2. So again, now I want to find the value of x when f of x equals 4. So I'm going to go over here now to the graph, and I'm going to find when y is 4. So up to where y is 4, and on the line would be the point 0, 4, or when x equals 0. Again, I would write it as a point. Okay, but what value of x do you have when f of x is 4? So go over to the next one and go up to 4 and go over. It's on the graph, and you're looking at the point 1, 4, or x equals 1 when the f of x is 4. So again, it all depends on what you're given. Are you given the x, or are you given the y and having to find the x? Word problems, and I know how much you love word problems. You're given a function about the local cable company, $90 per month and $12 per month for each additional premium channel. So the function for the cost is 90 plus 12x, represents the monthly charge when you have X number of premium channels. Using that equation, how many premium channels must you have ordered to get a bill of 114? Again, you are given the total cost, and you want to know how many premium channels would be required. Once you plug that in for Y and solve for X, you would say there would be 2 premium channels. Next one, what is your bill if you buy 5 premium channels? So now you are given the X and asked to find the Y. So if I put 5 premium channels, or 5 in for X, you would end up getting $150. So again, word problems deserve labels. So this one, there are 2 premium channels, and this one is a cost of $150. X and Y intercepts. All right, here's what you need to understand about X and Y intercepts. If you are trying to find the X intercept, then you need to put a 0 in place of Y. So if this is 0, and you solve, you get -8. Now, all X intercepts need to be written as a point, so that would be the point -8, 0. The opposite is true for the y-intercept. If I want to do the y-intercept, and I'm just going to write the equation over here again for you, that means this is going to be 0, and I want to solve for y. Again, write this as a point. I shouldn't have circled that one. Okay, writing that as a point, it would be the point 0, -2. So again, all x and y intercepts need to be written as points in order to get credit. Now I want to graph, so I identify the slope, the y-intercept, and the x-intercept of the graph. Let's first talk with y equals mx plus b form. If I write it in that form, the coefficient of x is the slope and the constant is the y-intercept. So in 19, since there is no constant, you're talking about a y-intercept at the point 0, 0. And then you have a slope of 1, which means I go positive 1 to the right 1, so up 1 and to the right 1. These are both positive. Up and to the right are both positive directions. And I graph my line. Now, what would the slope be? The slope is 1. You can also write that m equals 1 either way. And the x-intercept is actually the same as the y-intercept. It's the point 0, 0. Next one, from the equation, I know the slope is -2/3. Notice it is just -2/3. It is not -2/3 x. Okay, there is no x involved with a slope. The y-intercept is the point 0, 4. So on my graph now, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the y-axis, and a slope of -2, +3. So down 2 to the right 3. Now, with that being said, you can go +2, meaning up, but then you would have to go -3 to the left. So graphing my line, trying to graph this as straight as possible. Make sure you use a straight edge if you get a chance. And then the x-intercept is the point that it crosses the x-axis. So you're talking about the point 6, 0. Again, all need to be, I'm going to circle this up here, ordered pairs when doing any of your intercepts. Don't lose points on your test for not writing things as points. X equals -2. Now you're talking about a little bit different line. There is no x and y. So you're talking about the x-axis at -2 and a line that's vertical, goes straight up and down. Now there's some trick questions here. The slope, any vertical line has a slope that is undefined. Any horizontal line has a slope of 0. There is no y-intercept. Do not leave that blank. Teachers will count that wrong if you don't state that there is no y-intercept. X-intercept now is a point, -2, 0. 22, now I have to put it in the correct form. So I need to subtract 2x and divide everything by -3. So y is equal to a negative over a negative is positive. And so I divide both of them. This is in the correct form. What does that mean? My slope is now 2/3 and my y-intercept is 0, -4. So going over here to my graph, 1, 2, 3, -4 on the y-axis with a slope of +2, +3, +2. So that means to the up 2, to the left, or excuse me, to the right 3. Draw my line. And then the x-intercept one is the point 6, 0 again. So again, put things in y equals mx plus b form, state the slope, state the y-intercept, make sure both those intercepts then are also written as points. More graphing, and now we're going to graph an absolute value function. Here's what I want to say about an absolute value function. Whatever is inside the absolute value, so I'm drawing my little arrow here, okay, just the x this time, has to equal 0. That will give you the value of the vertex. Beyond that, now you just pick numbers that are bigger and numbers that are smaller and plug those in. So if I plug 2 in for x, I would get 4 times the absolute value of 2 minus 9. So the absolute value of 2 is 2. I'm going to write this out here. The absolute value of 2 is 2 minus 9, so I get -1. So I do each one of those points. I plug 1 in for x, I plug 0 in for x, and so on. So I'm going to fill out my chart here. So 1 in for x, I get -5. 0 in for x, I get -9. -1 in for x, again, I get -5. And -2 in for x, again, I get -1. Now, I actually want to do the -2 one again. 4 absolute value of -2 minus 9. Don't forget to take the absolute value before actually solving this. Notice the points that are above and the points that below should match when doing an absolute value. So now go over to your graph and graph those points. You get 0, -9, 1, -5, 2, -1. Same on the other side, so it makes a V shape. Now, vertex. We already stated the vertex then in our chart is 0, -9. Domain. Domain is going to be all real numbers. The symbol for all real numbers is looks like an R with a double line. And then the range are the y values, and the y values go up from the vertex from -9. All right, we'll do it again. What x value causes the vertex? So when x minus 3 equals 0, or x equals 3. Notice I put that right in the middle of my chart. It's because I want to pick numbers that are bigger, and I want to pick numbers that are smaller than the vertex x value. Now it's about plugging those numbers back in again. I always like going from largest to smallest. I think it makes more sense. So we got 5 minus 3 inside of an absolute value, negative, plus 5. So I get 2 negative, plus 3 would be positive, plus 5 would be a positive 3. And I continue to do that for each one of those x's. So now I put 4 in place of x, and I get 4. I put 3 in place of x, I get 5. I put 2 in. Now that causes some people some issues, but again, you get 4. Don't forget to take the absolute value, and this one would be 3. So I go over now to my graph. Positive 3, positive 5, 4, 4, 5, 3, and it makes a V shape, this time going down. We don't talk about transformations much, but the negative sign out in front causes the absolute value graph to go downward instead of upward. Vertex is at 3, 5. We talked about that a little bit when we did our XY chart. The domain is still going to be all real numbers, and the range now goes down, so it's less than or equal to positive 5. So again, the vertex value basically is where the range begins to go up or down, and in this case, it goes down. Last example now. Again, I want to know, where does the absolute value equal 0? So -1. Picking numbers that are bigger and numbers that are smaller than -1 and plugging those in. So if I plug 1 in for x, I get 4, 0 in for x, negative 1 in for x, negative 2 in for x. Remember, don't forget to take the absolute value, and then negative 3 in for x. So again, plugging those values in for x and doing one at a time. Notice the numbers on the top side and the numbers on the bottom side should be symmetrical. So negative 1, 0 on the graph, 0, 2 on the graph, and 1, 4 on the graph. Do the same thing for the other points. Graph. Vertex from my XY chart, we get negative 1, 0. The domain, again, is all real numbers, and the range goes up or greater than or equal to 0. That concludes our review guide. If you have any questions, make sure to talk to your teacher, and good luck on your test.